Boop. Robert Fain, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you, Dan?
I'm all right, hanging in there. So lazy Sunday morning, cooked a bunch of bacon and coffee, and
Oh,
now I'm
nice.
here. So we were just talking before I started recording about like ways to try to break monotony during the pandemic. As you can see, I'm wearing a shirt and tie just because I dug some old formal wear out of my closet at my dad's house yesterday, and figured why not wear it just for the hell of it? Because like otherwise every day feels kind of the same. And Rob, you were talking about your Thanksgiving dinner. Could you tell that story again?
Yeah, yeah. No, and I was just gonna say too. You're wearing a nice shirt and tie, and I'm wearing the same sweatshirt and sweatpants I wore yesterday. So
Yeah.
we each have our approach. Yeah,
I
no,
mean,
but
on another day, I'd be wearing the same shirt and sweatpants as well. So
but
you got to take
yeah,
it
but yeah,
different day by
yeah,
day.
yeah, but yeah, yeah. We were talking about the Thanksgiving dinner. Yeah, I mean, it was weird. It was like the first Thanksgiving dinner in a long time that wasn't with like any family um or like my partner's family, so we were just here and like just decided to do all of the kind of like family recipes
Mm-hmm.
and did chicken instead of turkey because it was just
Right.
more manageable size, but we invited our neighbor over, so it was good. Yeah, it was nice to just do like just the three of us did a very like small Thanksgiving.
What dishes did you
And
have?
we did chicken, we did mashed potatoes, and Brussels sprouts and carrots. And I made cranberry sauce, and
Mm-hmm.
our neighbor brought over a sweet potato pie that was really good. And my partner made a pumpkin pie. So we had kind of all the basics, all the
All the
staple,
essentials. Yeah.
all the essentials. Yeah.
In my house, the stuffing is usually the main event. My mom makes a good
Mm.
stuffing, and then we love the green bean casserole with the French's
Oh, nice.
fried onions.
Ooh, that sounds good. Yeah. I, I
Have
I like green beans. I don't cook with them enough.
Have you not had green bean casserole?
Um, I don't think so. I
It's
feel like my
like
parents would always just do it like they just like steam them or like
mm-hmm.
parboil them or something. But
It's basically
yeah.
just green beans with a cream of mushroom soup and then like a bunch of
Oh,
French fried onions on top for a
that
little
sounds pretty
crisp.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a nice combo.
So yeah, we're coming at you from almost a year into the pandemic, and feel like this is kind of related to your career path, right? Because you did well. Why
Yeah,
don't you introduce yourself and like what you do? So the topic is
sure.
the name of this podcast is Career Day, and usually I interview people about their jobs and your situation. I know you're in school, but why don't you introduce like what you've been up to?
Sure. Yeah, so my name's Rob, and I am a third year medical student at Brown Albert Medical School. And I am now in my clinical rotations year. So the third year is kind of where med students will rotate through all the different specialties that are all the different common specialties. So you'll do internal medicine, you'll do pediatrics, surgery, and I'm currently on a kidney, like a nephrology rotation.
Mm-hmm.
So doctors who work on kidney issues, and I'm doing a month of that, and it's an elective. So for a change, don't have to study for exams at the moment, which is really nice.
Oh,
Um, but it's been a good week. It's like it's definitely a more specialized approach, and so I'm learning a
mm-hmm.
lot about the kidneys and about like working up kidney disorder, like kidney diseases, and I feel like it's starting to feel real because we're getting near fourth year, which is the first half
Yeah.
is really about doing all your things to help your application for residency. So
Yeah.
it
What do you
kind of
do
feels
in
like we're
fourth year? Do you do more
yeah
rotations?
yeah. Fourth year is more like it's like elective rotations. So there are requirements, but it's more like credit requirements, and you kind of have third year is really like really prescribed, like except for electives everyone does the
Mm-hmm.
same things, but fourth year you really get to make your schedule what you want. And everyone a lot I feel like most people I talk to who are like now residents like look back on fourth year as like the fun year. But I think but then I feel like the early fourth year is kind of stressful because you have to do
Mm-hmm.
your more intense rotations to kind of prove that you're ready for residency, which is like the three plus years of postgraduate training you have to do to become a licensed doctor.
Oh, so you don't get your license until after residency? I didn't know that.
I think you get your, I think you don't have your license to practice independently. So as a resident, you can prescribe medications, you can place orders, you can do procedures, but you always have to have an attending physician or a higher level provider, like a nurse practitioner, like sign off on it. So there's levels of redundancy to make sure that you don't, if you because you're still learning. So to help prevent, if you mess something up, someone can address it.
Yeah, the training to be a doctor, I think, is probably one of the most extensive trainings I can think of. Because if you add it all up, you really have to start. I mean, most people kind of start thinking about it in high school and start taking the hardest science classes they can. And then most people in undergrad will do like major in biology or chemistry or something, right? So you do 4 years of undergraduate work, maybe 3 if you're really ambitious. And then you apply to medical school, right? And then you have like 4 years of medical school. And then after that, you have 3 years of residency on average, right? So kind of like if you say, I mean, if you start the journey, date it to like the beginning of college, that's 11 years of post high school training. So that always is reassuring to me. It makes me feel like my doctors are like really as trained as humanly possible. Although, having gone to a lot of professionals and stuff, I've also realized that doctors, like anybody, are human and make mistakes no matter how much training they've had. Do you know how it compares in other countries? How are there other countries where the training path is different?
I think so. I think the U.S. is pretty unique. The only other country off the top of my head I can think of that does it similarly is Canada, where you do undergrad in like any major, but you get your pre-med requirements and then you apply postgraduate to medical school. Most other countries, like most countries like the UK, most countries in Europe, most countries in South America, like you start medical school at age 17 or 18, like as a college,
like when you'd start a college freshman.
So you're doing the pre-med requirements and you're starting your medical school training at the same time. So it's like it might be like I'm not sure on this, but it might be like a 5 to 6 year degree to get your medical degree. And then a lot of other countries, unlike the US, which we can get into more about like how career decisions are incentivized, but in other countries, like most people become general practitioners or like GPs, they call them, like right out of medical school, and they have to do a little more training, but they're I think they're kind of licensed to do primary care, and then if they want to do more, they can go, they can continue in their schooling, but
to specialize.
Unlike here where everyone does residency in some specialty, be it family medicine, internal medicine, and then you can decide if you want to do primary care, if you want to do hospital-based care, which I think ends up leading to a lot more people going into specialties here to become specialists, because they're kind of, I think they're sort of like the cost benefit analysis of like, well, I'm already in school this much, I have all these, a lot of people have loans to pay, like they want to just keep going and get, and specialize in something. It's not like you can start practicing right out of, and it pays better oftentimes. So so it is kind of our system is strange, is unique, I think.
So I remember going to NYU, was it the Steinhardt School of Medicine, their page, and they're I think the only, or if they're at least the first, but I think they might be the only medical school in the country where it's tuition free. If you specialize in like primary care, right, a general practitioner, and they say it right on their homepage that like this is because the old system incentivizes people to specialize in something, because it pays better, and people want to pay back their loans. So their thinking is if we make people, or if we allow people to go to med school without loans, then they can be general practitioners, which I guess is kind of, there's a shortage of in a way.
I think it's it was exciting to see that, and it definitely makes me. I don't disagree with that aim, but yeah, it's interesting. I think it's applied to everyone there, which is it's great that it's like universal. But I think some other schools, like I think Columbia, have like basically gotten rid of tuition for anyone whose like family has an
Hmm.
income below a certain number. So I
Okay.
think it's interesting. Like different schools have different approaches. Some are more like redistributive, and some are more like everyone gets full
Hmm.
tuition off. But definitely the cost of education is too
Yeah,
high.
that's
It's
interesting. So
prohibitively expensive.
one of the things I often talk about, I mean, so you're only my third guest so far, but I think with the other two, it's come up like the cost of education and how that
Hmm.
factors into choosing a career. And in my experience, I try to tell uh, kids looking at college to not let costs be prohibitive to applying,
Hmm.
because if you come from a low income family, a lot of the best schools will fund your education.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Rob and I met at Swarthmore College, which is a tiny college with $1 billion endowment, and they meet 100% of your demonstrated financial need, right, without loans. So I was able to go there for like 10,000 a year because of my family's
Hmm.
finances. And I mean, I think it's hard a lot of times for like kind of middle class families where it's like they have to pay kind of a lot even if it's not full tuition.
Sure.
But yeah, I didn't know about med school. I kind of was under the impression that med
Yeah.
school didn't really do financial aid, but you're saying a lot of them actually do.
Um, it depends. Yeah. Yeah. Some do. I think but yeah, kind of like you were saying, I think like it's a little less, there's a little less of a, like maybe regulation in terms of how they do things. Like
Mm-hmm.
I feel like for schools to be needs blind, they have to they have to do certain things a certain way, like how Swarthmore does it.
Mm-hmm.
I know at Brown they do give financial aid, and they don't really do much merit based scholarships.
Right. That's how Swarthmore
And
is. Yeah.
yeah, it's like similar to Swarthmore. Yeah, exactly. And I think that helps make it more affordable. I mean, granted, there's like there's always hidden costs to everything, like the
Right.
cost of applying, the cost of just like
Yeah.
needing the transportation, housing,
Yeah.
but like
Books and all that stuff too.
books and all that. Yeah, resources like study materials, which is super crucial in med school. But yeah, I know friends who have gone to other med schools where they got merit scholarships, like full
Mm-hmm.
tuition, because they were just a really strong applicant, had a really good
Mm-hmm.
story, like good. I mean, they were really like exciting. Going to be, the med schools really like wanted them, and I
Mm-hmm.
don't think that was necessarily too tied to financial needs. So I think
Yeah.
some med schools, what a lot of people do is end up doing is taking out a lot of loans.
Yeah, like two hundred thousand
And
dollars. I've heard is the
yeah, I think
average.
the average, yeah, yeah. So
But
it's
it is one of those jobs where like you're pretty much going to be able to pay it back.
yeah.
It's not like
Once
you're
you're
doing.
done with
Yeah.
residency, the base income is quite high, and really like it's. I mean, I think doctors always like. I feel like a lot of doctors kind of complain that they're not getting paid enough, and like I think
Really?
when they're comparing to each other, like when you're comparing to like a cardiologist and you're a primary care doctor, you might be like,
Yeah.
I feel like I'm not getting uh what I'm not being recognized for what I'm actually doing.
Hmm.
But I remember like a family med doctor who was actually a Swarthmore alum from the
Hmm.
90s, kind of saying like he's like every full-time medical like doctor position pays well. You can live comfortably, you can pay
Hmm.
off your loans, you can live comfortably, you can go on vacation, you can
Right.
buy a house. Like all of that is available, like for the most part, for graduates of medical
Yeah.
school. So definitely, yeah, I would kind of like you were saying with college, like I would say definitely if you're for people who are thinking about medical school, like cost is a big factor, and maybe there are alternate
Hmm.
routes or like scholarships and other
Hmm.
programs you can apply to help with it. But yeah, I would say definitely like don't let the cost stop you from
Yeah.
applying, at least, and thinking about it.
Right. Because like there's merit scholarships. Right? So if you're a really strong applicant, some schools give that. And then
Yeah.
you mentioned need blind admission, which is, if anybody doesn't know, that's schools who don't look at your finances when deciding whether or not to accept you. And a lot of those schools, like Swarthmore, have really generous financial aid if you need it. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's really crucial to feel like your application is like they're not going to deny you because you can't pay for the school. At least you can get in, and then if the school has a good endowment, they'll probably give you a lot of finances. And then, but yeah, I mean, I think with med school, it's one of those things where it's a pretty sure bet that even if you do have to take out a lot of loans, you'll be able to pay it off. You're not going to be like drowning in debt
Yeah.
for your whole
Yeah.
life. So if it's something you want to do, you can kind of finance it.
Yeah.
Hopefully you get loans. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think with kind of with what you're saying too, like I think probably the more important question is like really if do you have that like do sort of a for someone who's thinking about it, like do sort of that gut check to think, is this really what I want to do? Because it's the time investment and the money investment. And like med schools on the whole, I think do a good job of helping people, like if they're, you know, at least a lot more than they used to. It's not like a weed out program like some
Okay.
undergrad science courses can be.
Right.
It's like
Right.
once you're in, there's a lot of, you know, resources to help you continue and to help you achieve becoming a doctor.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not perfect, and there's definitely, I know at our school there's been a lot coming to light about how certain students, especially students who are first generation med school
Mm-hmm.
or students from underrepresented backgrounds, like a lot of them have to take extra time or like take
Yeah.
time off, and that can affect like their loan repayments. And like
Mm-hmm.
for people who don't finish med school, those loans don't go away. So it's, you
Mm-hmm.
know, it's definitely not a perfect system by any means. But yeah, I think
Yeah.
I think probably more important for at least in my experience, and I've been fortunate that the cost element hasn't been as much of a factor. But
Mm-hmm.
I think being really sure that it's what you want to do, just because
Right.
it's a big time commitment and it's really exciting and there's so much you can do with it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, really make sure it's what you want.
Yeah, I think that's something we should definitely talk a little bit more about is like how to decide if med school is right for you.
Yeah.
An anecdote comes to mind. I went to actually a Swarthmore alumni event in New York City like 3
Oh,
years
cool.
ago. It was kind of like a networking event at a bar, and I met somebody who was a resident. I don't remember her name. She must have graduated in like 2008 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And she was just kind of struggling with the stress of residency. And I told her
Yeah.
like, yeah. So I graduated in 2016. So at this point, I was like 2 years out. And I said, you know, I have a lot of med school prereqs from majoring in neuroscience, and I'm debating
Right.
like knocking the rest out in a semester and applying to med school. And she kind of was like, I wouldn't recommend it. She's like, unless if it's the only career that you can see yourself doing, like if there's literally nothing else you would want to do with your life, then do it. But like, yeah, that was probably the strongest like opinion that I've heard.
Mm.
But your experience has been pretty good in med school, and I have another friend who's in
Yeah.
med school who's also having a pretty good experience. But why don't you I want to get to your origin story of how you figured out that you wanted to go to medical school. So why
Yeah.
don't you start? Let's start back in college when you were a music history double major, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what was that like? Like deciding to major in music and
Yeah.
history? Like, do you remember what your thought process was? What kind of music you were into, and all that stuff?
Yeah. I think I was always interested in music, and like my parents, like my dad was he played French horn, and his family
Mm-hmm.
was really musical. Like my dad's mom, who I never actually met because she passed away before I was born, but
Mm-hmm.
she was like a concert level pianist, or like classically trained pianist,
Mm-hmm.
who eventually decided to go into library sciences because she didn't like the isolation of practicing hours on end in the
Right.
practice room. But
Did she
anyway,
actually play professionally for a bit?
I think it was in college. I think she was on track to
Yeah.
doing that, and then
Mm-hmm.
she changed her mind. And my grandpa, but she like continued to play, and I grew up playing like her piano
Okay.
at home. So definitely music was in the family.
Like a
And
lot
I
of music
played
majors,
tax.
you're very multi-instrumental. Like I remember you
Yeah,
playing piano and guitar, and then in jazz band, which we were in jazz band for one semester together.
I remember
You
that.
you
Yeah,
did
yeah,
clarinet and sax, right?
yep,
At
yeah.
least.
Tenor
If not else.
saxophone. Yep, yep. So I like did that. And I continued to do that in college. And what kind of grabbed me in the music, like studying music, was I took like the theory class the first semester.
How to read music.
The first
music too.
Yeah, like it was music 11, I think, which was like
that's first, like the one step up from music 2.
Yeah, it's kind of like the first theory class in the progression for people who want to like major or minor in it. But it was like learning how to write like a simple melody using certain rules, and learning how to. It's so
fascinating.
Yeah, I loved it because it kind of like gave me some tools to understand the music that I really grew up loving. Like I had a piano teacher who was very into 20th century music and like the avant-garde, but he also was really into Beethoven. So like he kind of like got me listening to all this like really cool stuff, and then to finally be able to like start to learn how to analyze it, I got really interested in. And I also like started taking some composition classes while I was in college, and that's kind of what my niche sort of became, was more the theory and composition, and like the performance was fun, and I got better at it, but it was never my my strongest aspect of music.
Your fort.
That's it wasn't my fort. Yeah,
it's a musical term as well. Well, everybody says forte, which I've heard is a mispronunciation.
Oh, really? I've definitely said forte, so you're probably right.
I feel like studying music theory is like taking a science class where you're learning all this intricate stuff about how the world really works, right? Like you take chemistry and you're like, oh shoot, like salt is sodium and chloride, and like salt water is more conductive because of this. And with music theory, it's like, oh, that's why this sounds good and that doesn't sound good. And it's like literally there's a whole science to like what
totally sound good.
It's crazy.
I know. And like finding out that like before the Baroque period, like before the 1700s, and like Western music, like we didn't have scales that were like even temperament. We didn't have each note being like a similar distance away from each other. We had everything was, because everything was sort of based on like these ratios of like what sounds good. Like these, it's essentially like the overtone series. So like everything being like equal, like something that's like 1/2 above 1.5 times the frequency. It all gets very physicsy.
Like the perfect fourth and the perfect fifth based on frequencies, and
exactly.
They wouldn't have known the frequencies, but they could do like half the length down a string, right?
Exactly. They just kind of knew how. Yeah, it was all sort of based on what sounded good. And like choral singing too, like even today, like choral music doesn't follow like an even temperament in the same way that, especially if it's a cappella, because it's more based on like what ratios of the notes to each other sound good. But it was like super fun to nerd out on it. And
I remember
there's a lot of theory about and there's like a lot of theory about how like scales, like musical scales, like lots of different music cultures have their own scales, but they all kind of evolved out of this sort of physical relationship between tones. And so there's a lot of overlap, even though they sound different. There's a lot of overlap of like how they came to be.
Pentatonic scales, like universal.
Yeah,
have you seen Bobby McFerrin's video on this?
No.
So Bobby McFerrin does, most people know him from "Don't Worry, Be Happy," which a lot of people don't know as an a cappella song. He did that album all a cappella, and I think it was the first a cappella album to win.
It's incredible. Yeah.
But
so many like octaves and.
He does a talk at like some big science conference, if you look it up on YouTube, and he's on stage and he like creates a pentatonic like keyboard by jumping around with his body. So he teaches the audience like this jump here, this note, jump up, it's this note, and he keeps it pentatonic. And he says like, I've done this all around the world, and everybody gets it. Like the pentatonic scale is in all music, so like everybody picks it up right away. Which is interesting.
Yeah, it's cool. Yeah, and even a lot of stuff with like rhythm too kind of comes from these sort of ratios. It's interesting. Like all like salsa music has its like every different, and a lot of it's come from like West African like sort of drumming patterns and stuff. But just the ways that you can. I think what's cool about music is like the way you can take a finite number of like elements and then turn it into something really, like you have so many so many possible trajectories for those things. So
Hmm.
it's definitely like it's really science and art meeting together, and
Yeah.
which I think is kind of similar in medicine in a way.
Mm. Um, what was my thought? Oh, side note. Some people study the psychology of music. I actually just put an
Yeah.
application at the Harvard Music Lab, and that would just be
Oh,
awesome to
nice.
be like a research assistant studying the psych of
Yeah.
music. But
This
probably
might
won't
be a
get
little
that one.
different, but yeah. And well, no, I bet you. I hope that I feel like you'd be awesome for it. But is it? It's probably a little different than like music therapy, right?
I think they're interested in like what we were talking about, like why is the Pentatonic
Yeah.
scale universal and what
Okay.
makes
I
people
see.
like kind of what factors affect people's taste in music and stuff like
Yeah.
that. But I don't know,
Got it.
they
Got
might
it.
also study music therapy. That's more like
Sort of.
the
Yeah.
practice space, whereas
Yes.
the research.
Like
I'm sure
music in
there's
the
people.
brain.
Yeah, I'm sure there's people who do
Yeah.
studies on music therapy though. There must be.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
It's just
remember. So
interesting because we had.
go ahead. What are you saying?
Oh no, I was saying we had someone come who was a musician who trained at Berklee School of Music in Boston, and he
Mm-hmm.
now is like a music therapist
Mm-hmm.
at the psychiatric hospital here, and works with a lot of people who have psychiatric illnesses or who are on the autism spectrum, and helps them kind of helps them learn how to express themselves through music and sort of
Mm-hmm.
use music as therapy. So yeah, definitely probably like it's the same. The philosophies are philosophy similar, but you're right, it's like that's like a practical application of these ideas about how music sort of interacts with us and at like neurological level.
Yeah, I mean, so many people find music therapeutic. I know just recently I've been seeing commercials for Billie Eilish's movie, and I know that's one of the
Mm,
things she talks about even in the trailer is how music for her is a form of therapy. She actually has Tourette's
yeah.
syndrome, kind of little known fact.
Oh, I
But,
didn't know that. Wow.
and there's kind of
Yeah.
an interesting relationship between Tourette's and music. Like the neurologist Oliver Sacks wrote a case study of a Tourette's patient who had like severe Tourette's, but was a jazz drummer. And so he
Huh.
prescribed him medicine to help with the tics. I think it was Haldol, which is an
Yeah.
antipsychotic
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
blocker, which kind of really can slow at high doses can really slow you down and make you sluggish. So at
Yeah.
first the patient didn't like it because he would like bump into glass doors and felt really clumsy. And also, he felt it made him less creative and spontaneous when he would drum. And
Mm,
so he got off the Haldol, but then the tics got really bad again, and he
wow.
kind of made what ended up happening was Dr. Sachs and him spent a lot of sessions just talking about like essentially accepting that taking medicine would change him because I think he kind of
Mm,
the tics he felt were a part of his identity and he didn't want to lose who he
oh,
was.
wow.
So it was a lot of
Yeah.
getting him to accept taking medication. But then they also ended up reaching kind of a compromise where he would take it during the week so that he could function at his job. But on the
Yeah.
weekends, he would stop the medication so that he could be like this kind of spontaneous, wacky jazz drummer. So a really interesting
Yeah.
case. It
Yeah.
also shows up
That's
in
super interesting.
this new movie by Edward Norton called Motherless Brooklyn, which I recommend because it's like
Oh,
it's
yeah.
the only real like I would say authentic portrayal of tic disorders that I know, which kind of
Mm,
is personal for me because I've had a tic disorder since I was very young, and yeah, but like I think it really portrays like how it's not like he has Tourette's like which is the most severe form of a tic disorder,
yeah.
and it's not a joke. It's something that like he hates having,
Yeah.
but there's
Yeah.
one scene where he goes to a jazz show and he like kind of starts improvising with the music in a way that comes very naturally to him.
Yeah, wow. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's so fascinating. I never thought of that connection, but yeah, I can totally see it now.
It's
Also,
kind of
yeah.
I feel like having a tic disorder, I mean, just from my experience, there's kind of a natural, like almost craving to like do things that are like rhythmic and symmetrical.
Hmm.
Like that's how I actually described it when I was
Yeah.
very young before I knew like the term, is that like I just feel like I have to like make patterns or like do something a certain number of
Yeah.
times, which in a way is
Yep.
like music. But I think
Totally.
I'm also, I've also been a musician like more as a hobby, not so serious, but for the
Yeah.
past like 12 years. And I think it's a double-edged sword because it also gets in the way. Like if you feel like you have to do ticks while you're trying to keep a rhythm or something like that. So
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I got a chance to listen to some of your stuff and I really enjoyed it. It was great.
Wow, thanks, man. That's high praise coming from a music major. I didn't want to, also can't let this podcast end without mentioning Stew Crew, which was your college
Oh
band,
yeah.
which I feel like didn't get enough credit, but and like probably not many people would remember, but
You
those are
crew.
fun times with
Yeah.
you and Jimena.
I know, playing at the old club. Yeah, Jimena and me and my roommate Will and Stu, who was not in the band but was our
The
namesake and
mascot. Yeah.
our MC, the mascot. Yeah.
Yeah,
Good
college
time.
bands were the best, and yeah, I hope to have another band at some point in my life because it's such a wholesome experience.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, no, it's great.
but anyway, go ahead.
Oh no, just I joined or I start some classmates and I started a cover band in med school called Funkiform Papillae, which is like there's these receptors on your tongue called fungiform papillae. So
Yeah.
every med school band has to have some sort of punny like med school name. But we play a lot of like R&B and funk and pop songs, and I don't know, it's a great way to like get to know your classmates like outside of school.
Yeah. Yeah, it's such a good
Let
like
loose.
release, and yeah, music is a
Yeah.
good release and good for socializing. I mean, I remember we used to have band practice on Fridays, and that would like something to look forward to at the end of the week where you just get to like jam for 2 hours is really, really useful. So good mental
Yeah.
health tip, right? In these
Right.
times when a lot of people are struggling, is like music can be
Yeah.
good. Um
It totally can. Yeah.
the, anyway, just for the sake of time, I feel like we could talk about music for half a day, but I feel like we
For
wanted to
sure.
talk a little bit more about getting into the medical profession. So in college, you majored
Yeah.
in music, which is super fun, and also
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
history. And I remember
Yep.
you did a thesis based in art. You went to Argentina for a summer, right? Which I also went for
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
semester. So we both studied in Argentina, and you studied,
Yeah.
I remember, how people like oral history of, was it tuberculosis in Argentina?
Oh, it was actually, yeah, it was about the dictatorship in the 70s and 80s.
Okay, so not
So
public
it was
health related.
no, not really. Though
Although,
I
what
it
was your
ended up
thesis advisor? Did you work under Cecilia?
my thesis advisor Armus, Dr. Armus,
Almost, yeah.
his area of research was history of public health,
That's
and like
right.
tuberculosis in Argentina was one of his big topics. Yeah. Mine was my I feel like mine ended up touching a lot on not so much like health, but not so much like it was more like psychology. There was a lot of like psychology and kind of memory and ways that people sort of as a society kind of process trauma from
Okay.
that period. So it ended up being actually, I think, interesting for me. And I remember hearing some talks about other, so like one, as you probably will remember, people probably talked about in Argentina, like everyone has a psychoanalyst. Like that's like
Yeah.
everyone who like has the money is like sees a psychoanalyst. Like
Yeah,
psychoanalysis is
it's like
huge
one of the
there.
places in the world, one of the few places where psychoanalysis is still really big.
Yep, yep. And it seems like a lot of that has to do with like European immigrants, like especially like Jewish immigrants coming from Germany and France and in the early 20th century and escaping like the Nazis and stuff, set up their practice in Argentina where it's very large the European immigrant population. And so that kind of became like, I think a lot of people who dealt with these really challenging times in the 70s and 80s, and a lot of like people, probably a lot of guilt, maybe a lot of just feelings of like repressed sort of feelings about that period. Like it led into a lot of rich study from like a psychoanalysis lens. And I remember going to a talk that was talking about Iran after the Iran-Iraq war in the 80s, and they sort of had a similar sort of explosion of mental health care, but it was actually psychiatrists who became the go-to people because they just had more of a tradition of sort of medicine, psychiatry as the sort of mental health professionals who were most accessed for therapy and for counseling. So it's kind of funny. It's interesting. Like there was a similar, so both countries had a similar real increased desire to get mental health help, but it just came through different different traditions.
Yeah, so just
But
a lot of people don't really understand some of the terms involved with like
sure,
psychological help. So a psychiatrist is
yeah,
somebody who's a medical doctor, right? Has an
yeah,
MD and can prescribe medication. And their training, I mean, they go through like the same training that you're going through right now, like 4 years with
yep,
rotations in different specialties, and then they specialize in
yeah,
psychiatry. And a lot in America, at least, I've seen and heard that psychiatrists tend not to do a lot of talk therapy. There are a lot of
yeah,
psychiatrists who are
that's true.
part of teams where they're like, I actually did an externship for a week with a psychiatrist who worked in
Mm.
a clinic, mostly with people with addiction disorders, and
Oh
her
yeah,
role was mostly as a prescriber of
yeah,
medication. And there are other
yeah,
people who either have like a PhD or a PsyD in clinical psychology who would do talk therapy. Talk therapists also could have like masters of social work, MSW.
yep,
Usually it's at least a master's, or they be a
yeah,
licensed clinical social worker. And then a psychoanalyst, right, is like kind of out of fashion in the United States, but that's somebody who's
yeah,
really comes from the tradition of like Freud, Carl Jung, what
yep,
Jaspers also, I think. And they're
yeah,
all about kind of getting at these repressed childhood memories
yeah.
and like those terms of like what are some of the terms that they use like
Uh, ego,
yeah,
like ego
ego
dystonic,
and like
id, super
like
ego.
oral fixation or
Yeah,
like
yep,
projection onto somebody, and a lot of those kind of
yeah,
theories that like are still very much in like the public like zeitgeist and people talk about
yeah,
popularly, but it's not really something that American therapists are interested in. Like a
totally.
lot of American
Yeah,
therapists now are more like, let's focus on like more on your behaviors and like
yeah,
thought patterns now and less about what like you might have forgotten from when you were 3 years
right,
old and something like that.
right.
um anyway,
Yeah,
so
and I
that's like
think
right,
yeah,
mental health.
yeah, and you bring up a good point too, like kind of like how we were talking earlier about like how things are incentivized in the U.S. healthcare system. Like psychiatrists are really incentivized to be prescribers because there's a shortage of psychiatrists, and so what
Mhm.
becomes more economically viable is to have like a psychiatrist or two being the people who see the patients, they prescribe the medication because they're the only ones who are able to do that in the clinic, in the psychiatry
Right.
clinic, I guess. And then they work with psychologists, with social workers, with behavioral health
Mhm.
therapists who are trained to do therapy. But I mean, psychiatrists are also trained in things like cognitive behavioral therapy, which you were
Right.
talking about, is a behavioral approach, which is really has strong evidence that it's effective for
Mhm.
depression, anxiety, and other conditions, many other things. Um, but they're not really incentivized to do it because they won't get reimbursed the same way for that as for a 15-minute med
Right.
management appointment. And
That's
like
what
an
I was
hour of
gonna
therapy
say.
is more of a it's more of a time it's more time
Right.
intensive for both the patient and the provider.
Right. I was gonna say that too, that psychiatrists, they go to school for so long and they have all these loans to pay
Yeah,
off and they want to be compensated like a doctor. And you know, somebody with just a
yeah,
master or a bachelor's in clinical social work doesn't have that sort of pay expectations. So I think the insurance companies come into play too, where
yeah,
the insurance company, most psychiatrists or people with doctorates wouldn't be covered
hmm,
for talk therapy by insurance. Like a lot of insurance
yeah,
providers
yeah,
will pay because the rates are higher to go see somebody with a
yeah,
doctorate. So that most insurance
yeah,
providers will cover you to see somebody with like a bachelor's or a master's who's more of like a
yeah,
counselor, talk therapy specialist. Whereas, yeah, I mean, when I've done research, a lot of psychiatrists or PhDs are like out of network providers for mental health
yeah,
care.
yeah. It's really too bad because I mean I think obviously there's a place for medication. It's like really important for so many
Mm-hmm.
people. But like there's also a lot of people who maybe really doing therapy could really be the thing that that helps them in that moment. And
Mm-hmm.
it's unfortunately like it's tough to get insurance sometimes to cover that. And I think it leads sometimes to pushing more towards like getting them on a medication,
Mm-hmm.
which I think maybe for a lot of people it can help them, but that combined with therapy can be like the best
Right.
approach. So,
Well, I will
so
say
I do know,
I do
yeah,
think that insurances will cover talk therapy, but just
hmm,
more from not from like a psychiatrist because their rates are
yeah,
higher. They'll
true,
cover it from like an
yeah,
LCSW, and
yeah,
then a lot of people end up getting prescribed the medication just by their primary care provider. I mean,
Yep.
I've had
Yeah,
I've
no, it's
had
true. And yeah, most,
antidepressants
yeah,
prescribed just by my primary care doctor,
yeah,
surprisingly.
yeah, yeah, most, yeah, that's true. Most like management of common psychiatric conditions is through your primary care doctor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, totally.
So anyway, I know we keep getting sidetracked on a lot of, like, we talked
Tangent.
about all
Yeah,
music
no, it's
and
cool.
mental health, but I think, you really had a unique, and also, like, let me know,
Yeah.
like, if you need to go when we're getting short on time or
Oh, no
something.
worries. Yeah, yeah, no,
But I
I'm
think you really had a
happy to keep
unique
talking.
path into the medical field, right? So
Yeah,
you studied music and history in undergrad, and then I don't really know. I mean, I didn't keep in touch with you really after you graduated, so maybe you could just pick up the story from there.
sure. Yeah, yeah. So, and like we mentioned, yeah, like I went to Argentina and did my research, my history research on
Yeah.
sort of the experiences of the dictatorship in the 70s and 80s. And
Mm-hmm.
I did, that was my senior thesis, and I got to kind of keep working on my Spanish there.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of envisioned working in, like I would, and I started also in those classes to get interested in the history of like medicine and public health.
Mm-hmm.
And through other classes, we also had a lot of, like, one of those seminars, we talked a lot about the Cuban health system, and I was kind of interested in learning how they approached
Mm-hmm.
healthcare.
What seminar was that?
So I kind of, that was Diego Armas's, like, Reform and Revolution in Modern Latin America. So
Okay.
we focused, our case studies were like Argentina from the 40s through like the dictatorship,
Mm-hmm.
mostly focusing on like the Peronist government,
Yeah.
which
Crazy
is,
stuff.
yeah, in the 40s and 50s. The whole other story, yeah, Peronismo. And then we talked about like the Cuban Revolution and then like the aftermath. So it was
Yeah.
kind of like in a way, Argentina started as like a reformist kind. They had a reformist
Mm-hmm.
approach, which became more revolutionary, and Cuba was a revolution that kind of,
Yeah.
they say it's an ongoing revolution, but things have really moved in a more like reform oriented, and more
Yeah.
open to business and stuff. So
Just coincidentally, last night I just watched a movie on Netflix called Cuba and the Cameraman, which I would recommend
oh,
to
cool.
anybody because it's about a
Mm,
journalist who starts going to Cuba and documenting stuff in the 70s, and he keeps going
oh,
back every
wow.
few years and up until 2016. And he, like, interviews, at first he interviews Castro a lot, but then he can't get access, so
Yeah.
he ends up interviewing a lot
Mm,
of the same people, like friends that he makes there, every five
oh,
years or
cool.
so. So it's
Yeah.
really, you can see a lot of how Cuba changes over the years. So it's
Yeah.
like they're doing
Yeah.
really well, and like he's like, wow, the schools are great, the healthcare system is great, and then basically as soon as the Soviet Union fell, it got really bad,
Collapses. Yeah.
and then once it
Yeah.
opened up
Yeah.
to more tourism and foreign money, then it started getting better again. That's like the long and short.
Yep.
But I'd recommend
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
to anybody who has
That's
Netflix.
cool. Cuba through the lens.
Cuba and the
Yeah.
Cameraman, it's
Awesome.
called.
Cuba and the Cameraman. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah.
But anyway, so you're saying you got interested a
Yeah.
lot in the history of, like, public health through, like, studying Latin
Yeah.
American
And so
history.
yeah. And I kind of thought, like, I think, as probably you've kind of experienced too, like Swarthmore, the college,
Liberal
like,
arts
is
college.
liberal arts. A lot of people go on to get PhDs and do research,
Right.
and that I thought about, maybe eventually going back to school for history, like doing a
Mm-hmm.
graduate studies in history. But I wanted to like get my feet wet in like public health and in
Mm-hmm.
policy, and like working actually on like projects that are involved in those things. So the first the honestly, I had applied for some things and like didn't get anything senior
Mm-hmm.
year, and
Happens to everybody.
I know, yeah, it's a common thing, and I was a little bit scrambling to figure out what to do, and I talked to my second cousin who lives in New York in Long Island, and he was an assistant U.S. attorney who was
Mm-hmm.
running for state assembly
Mm-hmm.
in his first election. And so he was like, why don't you come out to New York and work on the campaign? You can be like a volunteer. And I decided to do that. And so I moved out to Long Island and lived at my great aunt's house,
Mm-hmm.
and right on the beach, which was great. Although I never had a weekend, like every day I was working.
Oh, dang.
And
Yeah.
so that was in like June after graduating. And I ended up doing that through election day. So it was really cool. I mean, every day you were like hitting the pavement with, I was sort of his assist, my cousin's assistant. So I was like
Mhm.
making a schedule, setting up meetings, like, and then whenever there was time, just for me, I would go just walk the streets of the towns and like
Mhm.
knock on doors and ask people if they'd heard about the election and try
Canvassing.
to,
Right.
get people to canvassing. Yeah, exactly. So I really like learned a lot about, like campaigns.
Mhm.
It was hard. I mean, it was a great experience, and it was also a really draining experience. But
Yeah.
fortunately, we won, and he's a Democrat now. He's a state senator in New York, and
Mhm.
that was really exciting. Like it really makes it feel worth it once you win.
Mhm.
I think I learned a lot about how so many local issues were about like healthcare access,
Mhm.
and were about you know benefits and insurance and housing costs and schools and like but I think like one of the big issues was there was a Hurricane Sandy back in 2013, and
Mhm.
that like uh Long Beach, where I was living, is just a little like island off of Long Island.
Mhm.
That's accessible by a bridge, but the
Mhm.
hospital itself got flooded. and
Oh.
and the story of that hospital is like so many in the US, like basically the the board of managers and the state government, like everyone just kind of said it's not financially viable to reopen it, so they just shut it down.
Wow.
So there was no like urgent care, no emergency medicine on Long Beach. So you had
Was
to
it just like a
take
boarded up, like old vacant
yeah,
hospital building?
drowned,
Wow.
yeah, boarded up hospital building. Really sad. And
Yeah.
um, a lot of people were like, "What are you going to do about that?" Some people were like glad it was gone because they had a bad experience there, but a lot of people were like,
Yeah.
"Where am I going to get my health care? Like,
Right.
if there's a storm, how am I going
Right.
to get to the hospital?" And I think like when we were in Swarthmore too, like in Philadelphia nearby, like Hahnemann Hospital suffered a similar fate, not with a storm,
Mhm.
but they lost money and they closed down. Like safety net hospitals all around the country are
Mhm.
going under, and it's anyway, that's another story. But so that I think it really opened my eyes to how much healthcare was important to people, and like how
Right.
much policy really impacted people's lives.
Yeah. If you don't
And
have your
then
health, you don't have anything, for sure.
exactly, yeah. And so I kind of realized that electoral politics, like I didn't see myself continuing to do that as a career path, because it was really really tough, and my hat's off to people who could do that
Right.
every election season. But I ended up applying for an internship in DC for the Organization of American States, which
Oh
is like
yes. Ooh.
intergovernmental organization, OAS, and everyone there like it's like governments represented from Latin America and the Caribbean,
Mhm.
and in US and Canada, and it's a really cool place. It was a really cool place to work. Like it's definitely like underfunded,
Mhm.
but I got to work a little bit in their biosecurity program and their cybersecurity program,
Okay.
and the the biosecurity one especially was cool because I got to meet people from like the CDC and people from like people who were involved in like responding to outbreaks and responding to like or like training to prevent biological weapons attacks and things like that. So
Hmm.
I got to
Don't they have
get a
like a
sense a little
research
more.
facility right around there in Bethesda? I
Yeah,
don't know. That's where the
the
hot zone takes
NIH
place.
or
Well, there's
okay.
NIH, but then
There
there's
were
also like an army research facility on like bioweapons
oh
and
yeah.
infectious diseases.
Oh
The
yeah.
hot zone takes
Yeah, no.
place when they like almost have an
Yeah.
Ebola outbreak and shit.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I forgot about that. Yeah, we had we had some people come talk to us about that, and like people from some of the other agencies, and
Mm-hmm.
it was cool. And I kind of I think as I met more people who were doing like on the ground work in medicine and in
Mm-hmm.
public health, I realized that sort of being behind a desk and like just setting up those meetings didn't feel quite enough for me to
Mm-hmm.
it didn't feel like enough and like close enough to the real thing for me.
Okay.
And so I did when at my time there, I got to like the most people spoke Spanish to each other, so I got to really work on my Spanish and get to meet people from different governments and
Qué
countries.
chévere. Huh.
Yeah, it was very yeah, it was cool. um, and then I started, and at the same time, I was also racing triathlons and doing
Yeah.
that kind of seriously on the side.
Yeah, so you and I were on the cross country team in college, but you
Yeah,
also swam, right? And were recruited originally on the swim
yeah,
team. So
yep, yep,
you're
yep.
like the perfect designed triathlete candidate right out of
Yeah,
college, right?
someone said I had the pedigree for triathlon.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
so
had the
like
swimming and the
I
running
thought you
background.
yeah, I just remember like following you on social media during that time. I thought you were gonna like go pro in triathlon or something.
Yeah, yeah. I was fortunate enough to like get to work with some coaches from like the USA Triathlon program, and started out just sort of racing on my own. And I got a coach and started taking it more seriously. And one of these coaches reached out to me, and I got to be sort of part of their recruitment class.
Okay.
And so I got to go to Colorado Springs and train at the Olympic Training Center, which was wild. It was like there were all
Yeah.
these
How long
Olympians
did you
there.
do
It was
that for?
crazy. It was like that was a 8 day trip, or like a week or something.
So you just like took a
It was
week off
kind of,
from work to do that?
yeah. I actually left my job early so I could do that, and
Okay.
like travel for races to finish out the season. And that
Okay, so
camp
you
was
quit
sort
your
of
job.
I quit my job, yeah, in yeah, like the summer, 2 years after graduating, and from
Hmm.
undergrad. And yeah, I just kind of gave myself some time to see how far I could take triathlon.
Right.
Um, and that camp in Colorado Springs was kind of a tryout for the team, for like the national team. And
Hmm.
I was, I kept getting better and had a really good season, but I think they were looking for someone who was a little more like, who already had the swimming and the running times of like a, like a all-American athlete. And that
Right.
wasn't me. I was kind of well-rounded, but I wasn't like
Right.
a really fast runner or a really fast swimmer.
You ran
Um,
about in the 5K 1450, is that right?
yeah, 1450s. Yeah.
I
And
don't know
and
anything
there were some
about
people at the
swimming
camp
times, but
who, I was like solid in the swim, but not, yeah. They wanted people who ran like under 14 minutes in the 5K.
which is
And
bananas.
which is crazy
Well,
fast.
it's a
Yeah.
D1. That's like a
And
D1 5K. Yeah.
yeah, so in a way, I was just like, I was really lucky to be included in that group. And like, I got to sort of experience what it was like to train at like the top of my abilities.
Yeah, for
But
sure.
yeah, but I think I also, in like quitting my job and just doing that full time, I think everything sort of revolved around your training. And I kind of just
Mhm.
felt like my life became more, it was, in a way, it felt a little like insular, a little bit selfish almost. I was just like, I was doing
Right.
everything
You're
for
just working
my
on your
my
body.
training and my
Right.
routine. Yeah,
Yeah, you're not really
exactly.
work. I
Yeah,
honestly like I felt that way too in college, and that's one reason. Like I pretty much stopped competing after sophomore year, which is when you graduate.
yeah.
So like I
Hmm.
really felt like I was spending so much time, and also I was injured a lot, so I did a lot of training like on the bike and like putting in kind of a lot of solo hours training, and it felt similar feeling where it just felt kind of selfish. Like I'm putting so much into
Yeah,
my
yeah,
body in order to run fast, which can be a great feeling and can be a lot of fun, but it also felt
yeah,
like, in the grand scheme, it wasn't really that important. But
yeah.
so I was curious, a couple questions. First, how long were you
Sure.
just dedicated to this training, trying to go pro in a triathlon?
Yeah, that was about like 3 to 4 months, I think.
And were you
Yeah.
really trying to go pro, or like kind of just trying to make the Olympic team?
Um, I was, I guess I was trying to make the Olympic tryout team, like the Olympic development team.
Okay.
But like going pro was going to be, I mean, I'm not going to say like it was definitely going to happen, but I was kind of like on track to going in that
Hmm.
direction. Um, so I think I thought, maybe I was still sort of figuring out what I wanted to do for like my non-athlete career. And I
Right.
think
Right.
I was open to the idea of racing professionally, just not quite at that level, like if it came down to it. But
Hmm.
um, I don't know. I think I didn't do that right out of college. I was already a couple years out, and I kind of thought like,
Yeah.
for me, like, although it's never too late to change your career path. I really believe that, but I think like I knew for me it was going to be like taking more time away from like figuring out what I wanted to do wasn't going to be
Right.
the best. And I think I was glad that I had that experience to like see what it's like to train like a professional athlete.
Yeah.
And it was, and I think I think if things had been different, I maybe would have kept racing and sort of tried to race them professionally. But
Right.
I was I was okay with sort of letting that dream go,
Yeah.
to just focus on other things.
So when you were working at the OAS and also training and racing triathlons a lot, and I assume you were also training like before that, right? When you're working as like a campaign assistant, how would you
Yeah,
balance
yeah,
that? How would you find the time to train? Because triathlons are kind of
yeah,
notorious. You have to swim, you have to find time to swim,
yeah.
bike, and run. So how would you do time
So true, so
management and
true.
kind of balance that with your work?
Yeah, I think yeah, I think I was a little. I mean, it was during the campaign. I wasn't able to train like super furiously, like but I was lucky also that I lived right near like a boardwalk and near the ocean
Mm-hmm.
and near like a pool, so I could I got like a membership at the pool, so I would go and swim like in the morning sometimes, and I could like bike everywhere too. So I would like I was able to like do just laps on the boardwalk back and forth, or like go
Mm-hmm.
jump in the ocean and do some swimming and get out. So
Right.
I kind of and I think like there was some evidence that like there were some studies that looked at like triathletes like training, and they kind of found that actually like overtraining was a real issue among triathletes,
Oh
because
yeah.
you can train so much because you're always changing your muscle groups you're using.
Uh-huh.
You can feel like you can bounce back and keep training, and like I mean
Yeah.
they train notoriously hard, but
Yeah, you're just
there
like
is a
anemic and
thing
have
about,
no energy.
yeah, it can definitely like affect you, like even just like psychologically it can be hard, like from a sports psychology perspective, like
Mm-hmm.
too much training that can actually hurt a little. But anyway, I at that time, yeah, I think it's like it's kind of a mindset of like just getting out the door, getting started, doing your like 30-minute run early in the morning,
In the
going
morning,
for a
yeah.
swim when you have a break, just like doing, trying to do essentially like two workouts a day, but they could be,
Right.
half an hour. So
Right.
if
Just
it,
doing
if you
something.
were short on time, just get your heart rate up, like get moving, practice your skills, practice like your bike technique. Like it
Mm-hmm.
was a lot of like learning how to become more efficient in like your bike or your swim or your run. So
Right. It's like I call it
that was cool.
practicing the art, right? Not just
Yeah.
working out for fitness, but working out for form and
Yep.
technique, which is really important too.
Exactly. Yeah, and in like a sprint or Olympic distance triathlon that I did, like the endurance was key, but also like your ability to do transitions, your ability to like switch from one discipline to another quickly was really important.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot you can do in a short amount of time. It definitely taught me a lot. It definitely taught me a lot about what I thought I needed to have in like a setup for training. And I was lucky to have a bike and lucky to have a
Mm-hmm.
pool, access to a pool. Not many people, a lot of people don't have that. But like, yeah, you can kind of you can sort of you can make a lot out of what's around you if you're, fortunate to have some of those basic components.
Mm-hmm. I
So
feel this is
that was
also
kind of,
relevant for the times that we live in. Exercise
yeah.
has become a big topic during quarantine. I see so many ads for exercise equipment now. Maybe I just notice them more, but I think
Yeah.
a lot of people are exercising more than they used to. Other people are exercising less,
Yeah.
and I think I kind of just started up again myself. I've kind of been very inconsistent since college, partly
Hmm.
because of having ulcerative colitis, but also partly because of just
Yeah.
like sometimes not knowing how serious to take it. But I think what you're talking about of having a routine and just getting out and like kind of doing something, even if you don't spend a lot of
Yeah.
time on it, for me has been a really like helpful realization that I don't have to go
Hmm.
out and spend 2 hours a day training like we did in college.
Yeah.
Because when you're used
Yeah.
to that, sometimes it feels like, oh, if I didn't run for at least an hour, then I didn't do anything.
Wasn't worth
But
it.
like
Yeah.
that's not true. If you go out, this is how I really believe this now. If you go out and even just do 5 minutes of physical activity, it's better than doing nothing. And I think like just
Yeah.
having that
Yeah.
mindset of like I'm going to do something to keep my body healthy uh, every day or every other day. I would say if you're starting from nothing, every other day is probably the way to go.
Hmm.
But like
Yeah.
if you do that consistently every other day, even just do 10 minutes of exercise, I feel like that's going to help your health and your
Yeah.
mind also so much, as opposed to just
Yeah.
doing nothing, staying inside. Yeah.
What's your kind of like routine? Do you like to work out like right first thing in the morning, or do you kind of find some time in the day
I'm
to get out and clear your head? Or
I've always been an afternoon kind of person. When I wake up,
yeah.
I feel like my muscles are tight and I'm very slow moving in the morning. So like the only time I really did a consistent morning running was one summer when I was doing research at Swarthmore, and John
Hmm.
Gagnon was
Hot
there.
summer.
Do you remember John?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we
Yeah.
would go in the morning, like before work, and while it was still kind of cool. And I just remember like the first couple miles would feel so slow. For me, I don't know. My body, I
Yeah.
don't think is. I'm not a morning kind of person with exercise.
Yeah.
But I know a lot of people love the morning runs. We used to do Sunday morning,
Yeah.
right? Almost every
Yep.
Sunday, 8 a.m. long run. Go
Sometimes a little
wake up
hungover.
and run 18 miles. Yeah, after 3 hours of
Yeah.
sleep.
Yeah. Those are fun.
But
Yeah, I can't imagine doing that today.
do you
But
how do you still keep up with training, or what's your exercise routine like now?
yeah, it's definitely a little more in the afternoons. I think like you and I both living in New England, like it's nice to kind
Hmm.
of let things warm up a bit outside.
Yeah.
But
You don't want to be
it's
outside
definitely,
at 7 in the winter in New England.
yeah, yeah. So I first year of med school, I've been kind of I've been running for just fitness, and I still like bike and swim, but I
Hmm.
started doing running a little bit more seriously again, and then I ran a marathon and down in
Okay.
Newport, Rhode Island, and then was able
Hmm.
to qualify. Actually ran with Stuart Russell, our
Stu
teammate,
Russ
Stu
of the
Crew,
Stu Crew
Stu Crew,
fame.
Stu
Yeah.
of the Stu Crew fame, and he won the marathon, which is awesome. But
Oh,
we
the
both
Newport
qualified
Marathon.
for Boston.
Okay.
Yeah, and so I was gonna race Boston, and then COVID happened. So right now I'm kind of trying to just keep a base level of like running fitness up, and then I think I might start to increase my mileage again
Hmm.
for Boston this fall, assuming it happens.
Yeah.
It's
Do
been
you
like a
track
year
your
and a half
mileage
delay,
now?
but
Do you have like a weekly
not
mileage that you're
yet.
doing?
Yeah, not yet. I think these days I go a little more by like just the days. Like I kind of try to see if I can run like 4 to 5 days a week.
Yeah.
Maybe do some kind of cross training if I'm not running, and
Yeah.
like trying to just get used to doing longer long runs, like getting back into the mindset of doing like a long run once a week. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's been a little more touch and go.
Yeah, I mean, and that makes sense. I think when you're out of college, when you don't have a team, when you don't have a coach who's kind of telling you what to do, and
Yeah,
if you don't have like a definite goal in mind, it's easy to just kind of play it by ear, be like, oh, I feel like doing this, I feel like doing that. I think there's nothing wrong with that, you know. Like I said, I'm a
yeah.
big
There's
proponent
something
of
kind of
like,
freeing about it.
yeah, exercising for fitness and mental health benefits, and not necessarily to be a competitor. Because I think, some people,
Yeah,
competition is really great and healthy for them, but I think for other people it can be kind of intimidating or stressful to always be
yeah,
comparing themselves to other people. So my
yeah,
PSA is just get out and do some exercise however you want to do it,
yeah.
right?
It's so good
but
for you. Yeah,
but I feel
yeah,
like, so we've been talking about so many things that you've done, you know, majoring in music and then getting to politics. We didn't even talk about your master's of public health yet, but
yeah,
you must be very good at time management, I would imagine. Now you're doing med school, which is notoriously intense, and you find
yeah.
time to
You
like
know,
do this
yeah.
podcast and train. Do you have any time management advice to give people?
That's Oh, I wish I had. I mean, yeah, honestly, I still think I'm not naturally that good at time management.
Okay.
I think, but I think what I've kind of had to learn in order to do multiple things, and to like for instance, like when I went to grad school, I realized then that I wanted to do medicine. Like
Mm-hmm.
public health didn't push me into medicine, but I just I it wasn't because I didn't like public health, but I met a lot of really great, med students and physicians and people who were doing both, and I kind of realized that's actually the niche that I wanted to go into.
Yeah.
But I had to like do my thesis while I was starting my post-bac classes. So I was taking like
Okay.
general chemistry, like
Yeah.
basically taking college pre-med and I still had to finish my thesis. So I
Mm-hmm.
think what I ended up doing that really allowed it to happen successfully was like to sort of time out, like to take, if you have like a project or something you're trying to accomplish, be it like a race that's coming up or
Yeah.
some paper that you want to write, like you got to like take that whole project and turn it into component parts, and then be like, between this time and this time I'm going to work on this part of it, and then and then I might have some days where I can't work on it, but then once I get back to it. So I made an effort to make sure that I had a project that was doable, like a little more on the fly, a little more remotely.
Mm-hmm.
So I picked a research project that was on actually like social connectedness, social participation, and physical activity, and mental and self-rated health, like
Okay.
overall health
Uh-huh.
among older people. So kind of relevant to this exercise thing. But
Yeah.
I made sure the data was already like ready to go, and I spent while a lot of other people were like studying for their exams or going on vacation like
Mm-hmm.
before the end of grad school, because I did public health school in the UK, and it's you sort of take all your classes, and then you don't really you get grades for certain things, but then your grade is sort of, in a lot of it, is decided at the end of this like big written exam you have to do.
No pressure.
No pressure, yeah. uh so during that time I still studied for that, but I think I knew that like if I didn't get the thesis done, I couldn't get my degree. That was like the most important
Mm-hmm.
thing, more so than the specific score on my exam. So I when I just one day a weekend, most afternoons, I would go down to like the computer lab at the public health school, and I would just start plugging in the data, like analyzing the data, going piece by piece.
With
And so I
SPSS?
kind of like it was data,
Okay.
but similar. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I think it's like it's like the open source version kind of, or
Mm-hmm.
like non-licensed version, but I'm not sure exactly on that. But anyway, I did my goal was to get all the analysis done before I started this postbac program.
Yeah.
That got done, and then once I was in the postbac program, I had 4 weeks of general chemistry, and I just knew we had an exam every week, and I just knew I wasn't going to have like time to do
Right.
research on the side. But then we had like a 2 week vacation, 3 week vacation after
Mm-hmm.
that. And that's when I was like, okay, in those 3 weeks, I'm going to write a full draft of my thesis based
Mm-hmm.
on, I'm going to have all the analysis done. I'm just going to have to put it all together. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think it's kind of like getting your ducks in a row, getting all of your
Yeah.
like doing the component parts, and then
Mm-hmm.
blocking off time to do the big part. And I think splitting it up into smaller pieces makes it
Yeah.
feel better. And what I actually had
Yeah.
to do was
Definitely.
I went home. I was definitely struggling. Like going back to doing pre-med classes was hard, like emotionally, mentally. I was like, I knew I was interested in medicine, but I was like, is this really going to be worth it? It just seems like a lot.
Right. Because
So I
somebody who
like went.
didn't major in science in college to
It's
decide like start
intimidating.
taking pre-med
Yeah,
classes after college, it's like, yeah, I mean, you probably hadn't taken a science class since high school, right? Well, I guess for your master's
yeah. Except
application, but
I took a general chemistry in college,
yeah,
and I liked it, but I mean it was tough, but
yeah.
but at the time I kind of was like not sure I saw the end goal, like
Mm-hmm.
of I thought medicine was interesting, but I wasn't really like leaning that way at the time.
Sure.
So this time it was it was just a lot really fast, like having
Mm-hmm.
to go back into like you know going back to studying like a college student again.
Yeah.
But I I actually went home to my parents in Ohio, and where I grew up, and I sort of I think another tip, or at least what worked for me, was like, if you have that time and you have a project to do, like um get up early, like early for you, like get up at a time like that you're ready to start the day, like get yourself prepared, have your workspace, like sit down or stand up or whatever, and just like I would do like 45 to 50 minutes of work, and then I would like sometimes I would disable like I would like turn off my Wi-Fi. I would do things, and I would just like type, and I would just like work on using like using the papers that I had. And books I had. I would just
Mm-hmm.
type up my stuff for like 45 minutes, and I would step away, go and like play piano or go like walk outside, like take a breather, take breaks, go back to it, and just try to do that like for as many cycles as I could do. And then when I needed a longer break, I could do it. And that that worked really well.
I think the main challenge in time management is really just procrastination, right? Where it's not really we don't have enough time. It's that we are afraid of how much work there is and we build it up in our heads. So I feel like a lot of the strategies you're talking about are kind of anti-procrastination strategies of like break the task into smaller tasks that are less intimidating and break the work into small periods that don't seem as intimidating, where it's like I'm going to work for 50 minutes, which sounds a lot more manageable than saying I'm going to work for 6 hours. I knew some people in college who would like talk about their work as they're like, I worked for 12 hours in the library today. And I'm like, there's no way you worked nonstop for 12
hours.
Like you definitely took breaks and stuff, it's just impossible.
I was kind of like that. I mean, luckily cross country and like stuff would keep me, from staying in the library all day. But I was definitely a big time procrastinator. And I'm also like, definitely get a lot of like writer's block. And so I know that those are things that can hamper my work.
But getting away from it took.
It almost, I think because I was on sort of a tight schedule, I forced myself to basically be a more efficient writer. One other piece of advice I got from, I don't know if you ever met Dr. Barbara Molesky. She was a professor of music history. She had a really good, I think a good advice, which is like, if you're writing something and you don't know how to start, like get up, like first thing in the morning, get up, like don't have any coffee, don't like do anything, just get to the computer and just like type for an hour. Like when you're like uninhibited, when you're not fully awake, just like just kind of word vomit out what you're thinking. And I think I am definitely like a perfectionist when it comes to writing, and I go over the same sentence multiple times and I'll erase stuff and rewrite. And like I think that is really, it's a good skill to be able to like to review your own work and like edit it, but like that I think is more effective later on once you already have words out there. So
the word vomit approach, I've heard other people advocate. Ernest Hemingway famously said, write drunk, edit sober. Similar idea. Like if you can just get into a place where you get out of your own way and just kind of let the ideas out and then kind of clean it up later. Similar thing, right? A lot of people are afraid to start. They're afraid the fear stops them from making any progress. But I really love the proverb that the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, right? So like if you can just start, you're halfway there, kind of.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's so important, and I think it's applicable to medical school and like medicine too. I think because there's just so much you have to do and be accountable for like knowing, and for each patient you see, there's so many things you have to think about and consider, but you kind of have to just jump in and just get started.
Right.
And I think like not being afraid to like get something wrong or make a mistake and to just own up when you don't know something. I think it for me, what I think's been in a way kind of like freeing about now going into medical school was I think for a long time I didn't really think I was going to be able to do it. Like I kind of didn't think I was like med school material, and then I like had some life experience and like got to sort of figure out what I wanted to get out of med school. And now I think there are definitely times where I like, I get down about stuff where I feel like, oh, I was like, I'm not as strong of a med student as I want to be, or I got this wrong, or I like didn't do this well on this course. But like at the end of the day, like the reason I'm doing it is because I want to help people and I want to like practice medicine, which is this really cool like art and science meeting together, a lot of interpersonal skills you have to develop. And I think I just kind of remind myself that I'm lucky to be able to do this. It's like a real privilege to be able to have that responsibility for patients and to get to know them and like earn their trust. And so I think that keeps me going, and it like allows me to just sort of jump in and not be apprehensive about what I'm doing.
I like that mindset of seeing something as a privilege. I think in terms of motivation, that can be so big. I often tell the
Hmm.
story that I really started being serious as a student my freshman year of high school because I got a scholarship to a high school, and like it was dependent on keeping up like an A average.
Yeah.
And so I really felt that my education was a privilege
Oh
for the
wow.
first
Yeah.
time, where like if I didn't get that scholarship, I might have gone to a
Mm.
different high school that wasn't bad, but I felt like privileged to be at that high school. And so every day kind of seeing my schoolwork not as something that I had to do and like was being forced to do, but as something that I was fortunate to do. And
Yeah. Yeah.
I've been thinking about this lately too, because I think we have with the pandemic a crisis of student motivation. Like
Hmm.
you probably seen
Oh
a lot of
yeah.
memes and heard like so many students in online school have kind of checked out. And
Oh
I was
yeah.
actually student teaching back last year when like the pandemic
Hmm.
first hit in New York City. And so we already had like kind of issues with low student engagement. And then when everything went remote, that was the biggest struggle, was like we would have class of 25 students and 6 would show up to an online class, and
Yeah. Jeez.
for like that same handful would like hand in something on the assignment. So it's like, and
Yeah.
honestly, a lot of students, I think you could say, like have some degree of depression going on, where they don't see the point in doing these studies. They don't have social engagement. They're not seeing their
Yep.
friends. They're not really seeing their teachers. So they don't feel that kind of
Yeah.
obligation to get things done. And like, even this year, so now I work with like
Hmm.
online tutoring, and there's so many students who come looking for a tutor because they are like 20 assignments behind because they just kind of gave up at a certain point. And anyway, my point was
Yeah.
I kind of was trying to think about how do you solve this problem. And I was like, well, you'd want to have to somehow change kids' attitudes so that they want to go to school, and as opposed to seeing it as just something they have to
Right.
do,
Yeah.
and see it as a
Yeah.
privilege. And I was like, probably the best way to do that, honestly, would be to get rid of grades. Because when grades, making it seem like you have to do this assignment and that assignment or else you're going
Yep.
to fail, it's all negative, right? You have to do this or else.
Yeah.
And then at the
Yeah.
end of the day, like the consequences aren't so tangible. It's like, well, what if I fail this class? Well, then you stay back. Well, then you don't go to college. Well, I don't have to go to college. I'll do something else. And it's like,
Right.
as opposed to if you see it as something like, look, we have this opportunity for you to learn information for free. You can learn a foreign language. You can learn computer
Hmm.
skills. You can learn history.
Yeah.
This is an opportunity that most people in the world throughout history never had, just to learn how to read. This is something you should
Yeah.
take advantage of, and it's free and it's here for you. And I think that would be much more effective at getting kids to really
Yeah.
participate in
I
school.
totally I totally
You know?
agree. I mean, I think especially at like younger grades, like in younger classes, like having grades is just not.
Yeah.
It seems antithetical to that mission, and I think
It's
like
like,
even
why
in
do
med
we
school,
still
like
do that?
yeah, yeah, like the first 2 years of med school were pass fail, and honestly, like I think
Mm,
I really loved it because I could sort of put in the amount that I wanted to. I could like learn what I wanted to, and you had to meet a certain benchmark. But I was learning because I was interested in the material,
yeah.
and now we have some
And because you
grades,
want
and
to be a good
it's
doctor.
yeah, yeah, and now we do have some grades, and it's like it can almost get a little bit frustrating at times. But at the end of the day,
Yeah.
like it's more about like I think what motivates me more is like the written evaluations I get from the doctors I work with and the residents who say like you
Mm,
did great on this, you can work on this. Like that's what that's what keeps me going, I think, and like hearing what they noticed about how my sort of work manner and like I think it's all like to try to become better at what you're doing. And
mm-hmm.
I agree with you. Like I feel like it's I don't know what your experience has been with teaching, but I think it's rare to find someone who's truly not interested in learning something.
Right.
Like I think most kids, most young people
Definitely.
have there's something that they want to get better at. They want to motivate
Mm-hmm.
themselves for, whether it's like you know riding a bike or like detailing a car or
Yeah.
doing some science experiment. Like everyone has things that excite them and they want to get better at,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe finding a way
Definitely.
to translate that into like you can with school you can get better at those things. Like everything you learn will benefit it, and it's
Right.
taking out the like the judging and grading and like ranking people based on those
Making
things.
people, giving people inferiority complexes because they don't
Exactly.
know. And another thing is like people learn at different rates. And I think, what you said about coming into med school with probably less of a science background than some of your peers,
Yeah,
and trying to keep that confidence of like you do belong there, and you'll
totally.
learn what you need to learn even if it takes a little while. Like talk about that as like having a growth mindset as opposed to a fixed mindset.
Yeah,
I think is
yeah,
hugely important, but like I can't state it enough because the current education system, it's almost like it encourages the fixed mindset because it's like, oh,
yeah.
you didn't learn, just for instance in math, it's like you didn't learn um, certain algebra strategies in 8th grade. Well, okay, so you got a D minus, you got a D in algebra, but now you're in 9th grade. You still don't know those strategies. And so now we're
Yeah.
using them all the time. And now you can't do the new stuff because you don't know the old stuff. So I think like a lot of students are consistently behind,
Mm,
not because they're not intelligent enough, but because of their
yeah.
past. And it's like,
Mm,
they
yeah.
don't, they're not allowed to catch up at their own pace in a way. It's like you're
Yeah.
always behind, you're getting dragged behind, and stuff like that. So I think,
Yeah.
yeah, the current
Yeah.
system is, it's just not set up for self-esteem and to encourage people to want to be learners. But
Yeah.
I always tell people to just have confidence, and like, not knowing something doesn't make you dumb. It just means that you haven't learned it yet, and there's
Yeah.
so much time to learn things that, yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. And like keep an open mind. Like you might get interested in something, and it might be in your own unique way that you kind of like come to some realize, some learn some skill or some knowledge base, and that can really be beneficial for everyone, like to figure out how you came to something, how you came to like learning something, why you wanted to like get better at it. I think that can help you a lot in making that can help people in making sort of decisions about what they want to do, and is like enriching, I think, to sort of provide your own spin on how you learn something.
Mm-hmm. I mean, especially now with like in the internet and access to educational
Yeah,
resources, that you
right.
can find information and learn yourself on a lot of things. And I know there are even some private schools that really don't have a set curriculum that allow kids
Hmm.
to choose what they want to learn.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, definitely. It's like, there's so much out there, and then it's like figuring out how to provide like a structure that motivates people to keep like learning and to keep doing it.
mhm.
And yeah, I think that
I feel like
figuring
I
out how to leverage that.
kind of hijacked the conversation toward education, which is
No, no, no.
obviously
This is
a major
so
interest of
crucial.
mine. Well, yeah,
And
I mean,
yeah, it's
we're also talking about med school and stuff. So,
yeah, and medicine too, just like even after med school, like education, like the teaching component, is a big part of how you learn. Like you learn from the resident above you, who is like the resident who's teaching you what they know
mhm.
in medicine, and then the attending who's above the resident is teaching them, and everyone's teaching.
The
You're sort of
mentor relationship. Yeah.
the mentor relationship is really big.
Mhm.
And I think I never thought of myself as being naturally into teaching, but now that I'm in med school and I see like a first year med student come to join us on rotation, or I'm at like a clinic with them, and they're working
Mhm.
with me, it's like I really enjoy being like, okay, like what are we looking at? What do you think? What are your thoughts? How
Mhm.
might you want to treat them? What might happen if they get this or that? So it's actually really fun because you get to see, it helps you consolidate your knowledge, and then you also can help this person
Yeah.
um, just learn
Yeah.
a little bit more themselves.
Oh yeah, you have to be like on your shit to teach something. And I don't know.
100%, yeah. But
Um,
but you don't even need to, you don't always need to know. I feel like, I think at first I was a little intimidated with that idea, but I think it's kind of like the more you practice, the more confident you get in your ability
yeah.
to teach, and then to also know like when to say, actually, I don't know this specific thing. Like I don't,
Right.
if something, maybe they'll ask a question that makes you think like, I'm not exactly sure.
Yeah,
So yeah,
I've been doing mostly online tutoring during this past few months, partly because my own health makes it hard to work full time, and also
yeah,
a lot of people working remote anyway. And I was like, okay, I think I can probably tutor like Spanish, geometry, biology. I'm going to focus on those three. And I
Yeah.
found a lot of times I would go back and they would be doing something that I just didn't remember from high school.
Mm,
Cause like, a lot of
yeah,
stuff
yeah,
in high school you don't really use in college. It's been so long since you took 10th grade
yeah.
geometry, whatever. So like some of the first few sessions, I would be kind of rough and feeling like, oh, I don't know this. I'm like Googling stuff as we're in the session to try to help them. And I thought the students would be like, this guy doesn't know what he's doing, but also I would actually like get pretty positive reviews,
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, because it's like you kind of do know it, you learned it before, you're just kind of refreshing yourself, but also like working through like geometry
Working
problems
through is,
with
yeah.
students and being like, this is how I would approach this problem, even though I don't necessarily know. I think the students learn and take from watching their mentors,
Yeah.
work through
Definitely.
something if they don't know the answer off the top of their head.
Definitely.
But is med school a lot of cramming, like just memorizing facts and figures and stuff?
That's a good question. I think different people, different med students, like have different degrees of how much cramming they do. I
Mm.
know for me, I like repetition. I like seeing things over and over again and like
Mm-hmm.
working through problems multiple times.
Yeah.
And so I think for me, I need to start earlier and like, look through questions, like sample questions and like, work through problems, review material like a little earlier on. And
Mm.
so I'm usually ramping up my studying, but and so, I mean, yeah, there's definitely, especially the first year, couple years, because it's more, covering a lot of general biology and physiology. Like you're
Yeah.
kind of, you have
Anatomy.
to memorize a lot in anatomy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of memorizing, and like figuring out tricks to memorize quickly is a big part. And it's useful
Mnemonics
later
and
on in
stuff,
med
right?
mnemonics. Yeah, I still
Yeah.
use them all the time for medicine now. But yeah, some people, yeah, some med students I know are more like they'll, study late into the night before an exam, like cramming all the material.
Mm-hmm.
But I just never really was able to get as much out of that.
No, I mean,
But
nobody recommends waiting to the last minute.
I definitely think for me too, like sometimes I feel like I might learn enough to, get it, to know enough for the exam, but then I'm like, what did I actually learn? And I think what's been nice about second year somewhat, but third year especially, is like once you start seeing patients with those issues and those like questions, you then start to actually be like, okay, what did I learn earlier on and how am I applying it? And some
Mm-hmm.
things that some things that you learn just to learn them, like actually now, like once you use them, then it makes sense. Like then it all comes together. So like a
Mm-hmm.
lot of the stuff, like when I'm on like the kidney team, like nephrology right now, like a lot of those problems have to do with like your levels of acids and bases in the body and your fluids in
Yeah.
the body and your electrolytes. And it's all like, that's when you actually have to work through, okay, this person is looking like this, I feel like this, their blood pressure is this, like what do I know? What's happening with
Yeah.
their kidneys? So
The million dollar
that's where you take
question, what causes kidney stones?
um yeah, different things can cause kidney stones. I feel like a lot of it is uh, yeah, I think generally being more dehydrated, I think
Yeah, I've
is a
heard
good
that.
sign. Like is a known risk factor. Like a lot of people in the South during the summer get more kidney stones.
Mm.
So yeah, dehydration, certain medications,
I'm sure
certain
like certain diets,
diets.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, certain diets can, and like if you have like a urinary tract infection, that can predispose you to stones. But
So I have a family
yeah,
friend
it's
who's
a
a
common problem.
retired. I have a family friend who's a retired emergency room doctor. He was telling us the other day how he had 20 kidney stones,
Oh
got
my
like
God.
all found at once. He had like was an X-ray. Yeah, you see him on an X-ray or a CAT scan. And we were like,
Yeah.
"How did you get so many?" And he was like, apparently like red wine and like good cheese can cause them." I had
Mm-hmm.
heard dehydration, like you said, too much coffee and alcohol, not enough water, not enough cranberry juice. But
Yeah.
the story
If
had
he
a
was
happy
having,
ending. He said he ended up passing
that's
them
good.
all pretty easily, but over the course of like years. Every once in a
Oh
while,
man,
he'd just pass a kidney stone.
painful.
Well, he said it
Makes
wasn't
me
that
think
painful for him.
I wonder if he had uric acid stones, because like you can get gout from a lot of like rich foods like cheese and wine. And but yeah, I'm not sure, but that's interesting.
Uric acid stones, and then there's what, calcium stones are the other common
Calcium
type?
stones are the most common. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's different kinds. Yeah.
I never want a kidney stone. I've heard
Sounds
it's like the
excruciatingly
most
painful.
excruciating
Yeah.
thing. Although I don't know, maybe after
Yeah.
living with ulcerative colitis, it won't be so terrible.
Mm, it's scary. Yeah. I mean, people are really in pain, and they can really look pretty sick from it. So
Mhm.
yeah. But
I
yeah,
think
no, it's
pain
cool. It's
is like
all.
we think of pain as like just a
Oh no, go
psychological
ahead.
thing, but it's also like it's a physical
Hmm.
thing, right? It's a physical process,
Yep.
and it's like emotionally and physically draining. Like imagine like all the
Yeah.
straining and like tenseness of your body, like literally it raises like your heart rate and blood pressure. So I think a lot of people don't realize pain is like
Yeah.
physically exhausting as well as emotionally
Yeah.
exhausting.
Oh,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah. It's was there's something I saw that like people with, I think it was people with chronic, oh, I might be getting this wrong. Some kind of chronic pain is like,
Mhm.
having that is like their quality of life is lower than people with like really chronic conditions. Like, people with like it's like worse than people with heart disease and stuff. Like people
Mhm.
with like chronic back pain or things like that are really
Yeah.
like their quality of life is really impaired.
Right.
So it's super, yeah, super important. And I think we're I think because then it comes back to our system, like what gets incentivized. Like we don't do a great job like incentivizing and like allowing people to take time off work and do physical therapy and do all, do
Mhm.
the things that you have to do. Pretty, it can be pretty involved to really manage chronic pain. And unfortunately, like for a long time, you know we like misinformation and like some and some sort of dishonest medical practices led to a lot of people getting prescribed opioids for pain,
Right.
and that does not even really the evidence isn't even very good that it's that effective. So um,
Mhm.
now we're kind
Huh.
of dealing with the addiction issues. So it's pain is so it's underfunded and underappreciated, I think, in terms of how to manage it.
Right. Probably because it's not so much of a physical thing. It's not as easily
Yeah, it's
understood
hard
as like a
hard
broken
to
leg.
understand. Yeah.
Like with any
Right.
like
Yeah.
psychological issue, you can't really see it. You can't touch it,
Hmm.
you know.
Yep. But it's there. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
Um, well, I think this has been a really long and interesting podcast. I feel like we could keep going a long
Thanks.
time, but maybe we should
Yeah. I've had
kind
a
of wrap
blast.
up. And yeah, I mean, we could always
Yeah.
keep up on the possibility of doing a sequel because I feel like there's so many questions still unanswered of like what the med school experience is like,
Yeah. That
with
would be, yeah,
and
that'd be
public
great.
health and stuff.
I feel I feel like our conversation kind of went sort of all the things surrounding kind of medical school, but and I
Mm,
which I it's so fun to talk about because I think that's another thing is like medical school takes up a lot of your time and energy, but it's important to have your life still, how to like have your interests and
right,
take what you're interested in and like apply it to medicine.
right.
So I think that makes the field like richer. But yeah, I thank you so much. I would be happy to talk more about specifically like medical school if anyone has questions, or if there's anything you want to talk about. I'm always
Hmm.
always game to meet up and chat.
Great. Yeah, you've been an awesome guest. And,
Thank you.
it's not like we kind of got totally sidetracked because I think my intention for this podcast is to talk about, the specifics of a career path, but also the personal details of how somebody got into that career path
Yeah.
and personal life and things about like around that. Cause I think, our job is a part of our life and like how we integrate
Yeah.
it with our life. So, you know, actually one of the reasons I wanted you to be one of my first guests is because I thought you had this really interesting mix of work with other things. So I hope
Yeah.
we learned something about work-life balance and taking like kind of circuitous paths to before you find like a real fixed career.
Yeah. And yeah, no, I mean, I'm grateful to have the opportunity to talk about it because yeah, a lot. I mean, I feel like for so many of us, like as we get older, like our lives take us in all these different directions, and
Mm-hmm.
it's nice to like reflect on that and be like, how did things turn out the way they did, and like what did I learn from it? Like
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, definitely is exciting to, to be moved it can be exciting and nerve-wracking to change routes, but it's totally doable. So yeah.
Well, the only constant in life is change. That's for sure. So anyway, I hope you have a good, relaxing Sunday afternoon. Are you gonna get a
Yeah,
run or
thank you.
workout in today?
Yeah, I think maybe a run of some sort. Weather's getting a little nicer, so before it gets dark, I might get out there.
Run down to the river, maybe there in Providence.
Yeah, maybe run along the bike path or something. Or I wish there were a few more trails, but there's some good street running for sure. It's a pretty cool city. Yeah, I hope you have a good rest of your Sunday too.
Yeah, thanks, man. And hopefully in the near future I can get up there for a visit or something, because I do love Providence, and it'd be great to go for a run with you.
Yeah, don't be a stranger. We can always meet somewhere in the middle too. So
this is true.
Just let me know.
But yeah, thanks again, Robbie. I'll be in touch.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Yep. Peace. See ya. Have a good one. Bye.
You too.